Hi everyone, Sam here. Welcome to another episode of Azure Snippets. Today we're going to have a look at how we can restrict access to our Azure App Service so that we can lock it down to a list of IPs that we want to allow. So by default, when you deploy an app service in Azure, you get access to it from anywhere on the internet. Anyone can hit the URL and load your page, which is most of the time what most people want. However, there are scenarios where you want to restrict who can actually talk to the application. Or maybe it's a development version of your site that you only want the developers to access and not to be accessible to the rest of the world. Or it's got preview features and so on. In that sort of scenario, you want to be able to lock down the app service to only accept requests from certain locations, and generally you're going to want to do that by IP ranges. So today we're going to have a look at how we can achieve that using the app service. Before we delve into that, a quick note on what we've got on the screen here. If you need completely isolated app services, then what we're going to talk about today isn't really going to do what you want. We're still exposing the application to the internet. We are just limiting who can get in. If you need it completely isolated, then you need to look at something called App Service Environment, where you can run a single tenanted instance of an app service inside your virtual network in Azure, and that will then sit inside your VNet and only be accessible inside there unless you decide to open it up. The App Service Environment is a great solution for that sort of thing, but it is very expensive. You are spinning up effectively all the resources behind an app service that in the multi-tenanted environment are covered by Microsoft. The pricing for this is obviously spread across multiple users. In an app service environment, because this is single tenanted, you're having to pick up all the costs for those resources behind it. So it is quite expensive and it is fairly complex. So if you don't need that level of isolation, you just want to restrict access to certain IP ranges, what we're going to talk about today should do what you need. So I've got an app service here which has been deployed already. It's up and running. There's no content in it, but you get the default app service up and running page, which shows we can access this directly from the internet from my home PC. So at the moment, nothing's locked down. We can access that just fine. Over in the Azure portal, this is the web application. And so what we need to do is configure this to be locked down to some IP addresses that we're going to define. So this setting is all done in the networking section of the app service. So if we click on that, we get various different options, and down the bottom here you've got an access restrictions section. So if we click on configure access restrictions, and this takes us to a page where we can define the IP ranges we want to access the web application. So at the moment we've got this allow all rule, which lets anyone in. So we're going to add a rule, and we're going to give it a name. So let's call this our London office. We're going to allow it, give it a priority. And then you can choose between IP4 and IPv6 or a specific virtual network if it's coming from Azure. And in here, you are limited to providing either a single IP or a CIDR range. There's no way to pass multiple IPs in here if they're not in a consecutive range. So we're just going to put in an IP range. And click Add Rule. And if we see now, we've got our range in here. We're allowing that, and you can see now the allow all rule we had before has been changed to a deny all rule. And that will prevent anybody who's not matching any of the rules above to be able to get denied when they hit this website. The second thing, you can see there are two tabs in here. So the first tab here has the name of our actual website. The second tab is this SCM option. So this is the back end service management piece of the web application. This is the Kudu interface if you've ever used that. And so we can define rules to access that as well. So you might want to have the same rules as what's on your front end website, which is easy. We can just tick this box. But in some scenarios, you might actually want to make them different. So for example, if you're doing an automated deployment, your deployment tool is going to need access to the SCM interface. It doesn't necessarily need access to the front end of the web application. So you could have different rules for that compared to the front end. We're just going to leave that as is, and we've now got that set up. We hop back to our web application and we refresh the page. Instead of getting the default splash screen, what we get is a 403. So it's saying the web application is stopped. That's not technically true, but that's the response you will get if you are not authorized to access the web application. So that's a simple way of defining the rules. Now, this is slightly painful here if you need to add a lot of rules, because you've got to add them individually unless they're in a contiguous range. And that can get quite tedious if you're going to have to add them in. And if you're doing automated deployments as well, you are definitely going to want to use an ARM template or similar to define these. That's going to make it easier because you're defining them once in the template and then deploying them. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So over in VS Code, we've got an ARM template for deploying this web app. It's pretty standard web app deployment, nothing too special. So we look at this site config section where we've got an IP security restrictions array. So this allows us to define an array of those restrictions we want to add. Each entry here is an entry on the restrictions page, and we're supplying the same information, the IP address, priority, and the name. The IP address needs to be inside the notation, so for a single IP you'd use the /32, obviously for a range you'd use the appropriate range. And we can define as many of these in here as we want, and then deploy that, and they'll get added as restrictions into the web application. So if you're doing a lot of restrictions, or you want to do automated deployments, this approach might be an easier one than using the web portal. So now we've got that done, we're going to go ahead and deploy that. So we'll start the deployment just using the AZ PowerShell commands. And that's now deployed. So if we hop over back to the portal, you can see at the moment we've got the old rule in there, but if we hit refresh to update this, and we can see now we've got the rules we added from the ARM template added in, the correct priority, name and range, and they're all set to allow. And so that's ready to go. That's really all there is to it. I hope this video has been useful, and I'll talk to you next time on Azure Snippets.